Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. Tonight we have some UFO stories and alien abduction stories for you. So enjoy and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I woke up with a start and heard the most unsettling, rhythmic, pulsing, vibrating sound. I have never heard this sound. Not in real life and not in movies either. I remember being scared and then all of a sudden I felt calm and peaceful and I fell back to sleep. 2 months before this, I had sleep paralysis where I was pulled out of my body and through the walls of my house backwards into the night sky. The stars looked like they would if I were doing this in real life. In fact, it was the same night. I also had a dream in which I was on a floating table and 4 beings led me out of my house through walls. What it was, I don't know, but it was weird. And after I heard that noise, I was smoking on my porch at 2 a.m. There were leaves on my lawn, so I started hearing something with 2 legs walking across it. Its gait moved with a lot of grace. I didn't really move or push through the leaves. No matter what it was, I think it had long legs. Anyway, I was watching and making sure it wasn't the wind or squirrels when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I suddenly felt like prey. I'd like to say sorry ahead of time for my English. Even though English isn't my first language, I really want to share my stories now that I've kept them to myself for 20 years. So, I often wake up in the middle of the night to get a drink, since I was a child. At night, my mum would make me tea or something else to drink. So when I woke up, I would drink it and go back to sleep. This is important information for my first experience, which happened when I was about 4 years old. When I woke up to get a drink, I would see a glowing blue man next to my bed. It was big and had no features on its face. It was just the outline of a man made of blue light, and the man itself gave off the same blue light. I hope that's clear. I remember having simple conversations with people through telepathy. Someone asked me how I felt, what happened to me, etc. During the day, well, I finished my drink and we all went back to sleep. I don't remember anything worse. But I ran into these people for about 3 years before I started school, and they stopped. What makes me believe I didn't dream at all, because I always woke up at the same time and saw the thing. My drink, which I drank while talking to it, was always gone by morning. I don't think it was a ghost or a dead relative of mine because I didn't have any at the time, and it happened in a brand new house that my parents built. There is still a chance. But I never told anyone about this at the time because I knew it wasn't right. My next big events happened when I was in elementary school. I had a dream that my window opened and a huge light came in. The light picked me up from my bed and carried me out the window while I lay still and felt paralyzed. It scared me so much that I became obsessed with making sure my curtains were closed perfectly so that no light from outside could get into my room. I remember that every night this made me feel like I was going to have a panic attack. Something really scared me. My mum said that she once saw me struggling with my currants and crying and begging them not to take me again. She was scared, but she didn't say anything. When I was a teenager and we were telling stories, she told me this. I don't remember much about what happened before this, but I had a strong urge to check my right ear. Then I saw a needle scar in front of my upper ear that looked like a hole. It looks like the opening in my ear, but it's not. I was scared. And as I looked, it felt like there was something solid under my skin. I tried to get it out by pinching my skin together, but it didn't work. I was crying so hard I couldn't stop because I didn't want that in my body. I remember that I had planned to cut it out, but I didn't do it. I don't remember anything else except that I was scared and eventually tried to ignore it. My parents and I got into a fight because I remembered having this when I was a kid. Their response was to pull out pictures of me as a baby, and even the papers from the hospital where I was born. The paperwork doesn't say anything about the thing in my ear, and the photos don't show anything. I still don't know what to think, but the day I let my parents, sister and fiancé touch my ears and compare them to each other was a good sign. I'm not making this up. My right upper ears were kind of swollen, and you could definitely feel something solid under my skin. Everyone did. They also felt it and were scared. This was the first time I ever told anyone about this scar, which was strange for everyone. This was talked about a lot for a few days. The same week I started talking about it, my fiancé was out of town visiting his parents, and I was alone one night. I went to bed early, but woke up because I didn't feel right. I looked out the window and saw stars moving around. They were shining like stars, but one minute they were white and the next they were red. In fact, they were blinking. Even though I know something is wrong, I still wanted to go back to sleep. So I did. When I woke up in the morning and looked in my ear, there was nothing there. My right upper ear was still swollen, but the lump had gone away. Weeks went by, and I tried to forget about everything as much as I could. I was afraid, like I always was. Then, a month later, I saw the same blinking star, and the solid thing was back in my ear the next morning. I'm really scared right now. I tried to ignore it as long as I could, but it was clear that that didn't help me much. I always feel worried, just from hearing about UFOs, aliens, and extraterrestrial. I always feel uneasy when I watch movies or read about them. I don't have a clear picture of what happened to me, but I know what happened. There was nothing good about it at all. I tried meditation a few times because I thought it might help. But as soon as I start to relax my body and mind, I see this. I'm in a white room with 3 beings, and I can see it with my own eyes. I'm paralyzed and lying in a hospital bed with white sheets over my legs. The thing closest to me looks like a grey alien holding something as if it's looking at me. In front of me is a door, and on each side of the door is an alien that looks like a reptile. I don't know what people felt when they meditated. Maybe I was just making things up in my head. It could have been a piece of a memory. So far, I really don't know. These are the things I've done. So I went to rehab way up in the mountains of Pennsylvania. If you look down at this tiny town, you could see the whole town and miles of empty land beyond it. Around the building, there were security cameras. One of the older counsellors asked me and a few other guys if we wanted to see a UFO. He pulled out his phone and showed a video of a computer that he had taken with it. On the computer, security footage is playing from one of the cameras that is pointed at a small outdoor area with some tables. You can also see a hilly part of the mountain and the sky beyond that, which we are all watching, and this glowing orange disc comes and hovers by the mountain, rocking back and forth. It stays there for about 20 seconds before taking off into the sky. I knew where I was. It was clear from the recordings where the security camera was pointed. This is really cool. This one happened when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. My best friend and I were at a local amusement park on a school field trip. We were at the top of the Ferris wheel when a rainbow disc came flying through the sky. It was close, too. We could see it very well. It looked like a thick frisbee with a grey metal centre and red, yellow, orange and blue stripes. We dropped to the ground and ran to tell our parents, but they didn't see or hear anything. It seemed like no one else had seen it for years. I thought it was just a dream I had, but a couple of months ago I asked my friend on Facebook if he remembered it, and he did. After rehab, I was in a bad place in my life. I got an apartment, but my roommates broke the lease, so I had to move back home. I was at rock bottom. I lost my father while I was in rehab. I also lost my girlfriend, who I was still very in love with, and a few friends. One of them died because of something I did. It seemed like everything I had been through and worked for in the past year and a half had been for nothing, and I was right back where I started. I felt alone. I went outside at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night to look at the stars and ask for a sign. I'm not religious, so I don't know who I asked, but something answered. I looked up and saw a green light. It looked like the Northern Lights and a SpaceX rocket taking off at the same time, but it was a lot of fun. It got bigger, and it kind of looked like an angel. Only like a kid would draw it. It was beautiful and hypnotic, like a pure energy being. I felt so calm, as if something I couldn't understand was watching out for me and telling me not to give up. In the spring of 2012, I spent a few weeks just traveling around central Texas and camping wherever I happened to be when it was time for dinner. One night, I ended up right next to Enchanted Rock, a cool little mountain about halfway between Llano and Fredericksburg. I like to sleep under the stars when the weather is nice, and the temperature that night was in the 70s, which was perfect. About a quarter of the way up the mountain, I left the trail to find a good spot for my tarp and bedroll. After setting up, cooking a light meal and eating, I laid down for the night. As I was falling asleep, I heard a strange sound. I didn't give it much thought until I saw a light on the trail about 100 feet away. I jumped up, put on my boots, and ran to the nearest tree. The light looked around for a while, but it never really got close to my camp or me, and then it just went out. The noise, which had been going on the whole time, got really loud, and then a circle of 6 yellow lights appeared above the mountain and flew away to the west. I went back to my camp, packed up, and slept in the back of my truck with a cover on it, another time or around the same time. But as my adventurous streak was coming to an end, I was at Lake Whitney in one of the downside parks, something bluff. It rained all day, and by the time it got dark, everyone and everything was miserable. Given how bad the night was, the rain stopped, and I was able to set up my tent. I didn't feel like cooking, so I had an M-R-R-E in my tent. After I locked up my tent and snapped the door shut, I went to bed at night. When I woke up, I couldn't move. The inside of my tent grew and got bright white light. Around me were 4 people with 2 legs and 2 arms. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything. I was just there. After telling myself to wake up for a while, I finally did. My boots were covered in fresh mud, but my tent was still closed, and my mummy bag was still tightly wrapped, so I ruled out going back to sleep until I had packed my bag and rolled up my sleeping bag. When I went outside and looked around, I saw that the ground was completely dry. No one else around me had left footprints or a mud path to my tent. I still don't know how or why my boots were covered in mud the night before. A few years ago, my campsite was the only dry one. I think it was around 2010 or so, but I'm not sure. I was taking night classes at a local community college. Since it was winter and the class started at 7, it was dark when I left the house. Across from our house is a vacant lot in a field with 2 radio or cell towers in the distance. We're always pretty close to the airport's flight path, and the nearby marine base sends military helicopters over every once in a while. The point is that even at night, I know what these things look like and how they sound. So it was a little strange to see a steady white light above the cell towers one night. It was too bright to be a star and didn't move or blink. I looked at it for maybe a minute and a half, then shrugged and got in my car. There's probably a good reason for it. I had to go, so a few minutes later I was driving through the neighborhood when I saw the light again, but this time it was closer. Even better, it seems to be heading my way. I'm curious enough to put my car in park and get out to see what it is. It's hard to tell how big it is because it's black against a black background. If it was right above the treetops, it might be the size of a bust. If it were any higher, it would be a lot bigger. On each corner, these bright, steady white lights are set up in a triangle shape. As I watch, it drifts. That's the first word that comes to mind, but I think the best way to describe it is as a smooth, unhurried walk across the road in front of my car. It doesn't make any noise, like the sound of an engine, and it doesn't move the trees as it goes by. The object makes no sound at all. I really liked it because of that. I mean, I can still make sense of what I saw, but the fact that something so big could be completely silent was strange. It takes about 30 seconds to move across the road and disappear behind the trees. I didn't see it again after that. I don't know if what I saw was from another planet, but they were things I couldn't figure out. Okay, first, when I was a kid, I was already interested in UFOs. My mum, a family friend, and I were driving home from visiting family who had a big book on UFOs and aliens that I read a lot. We were on a 2-lane road in the country, where the houses were spread out and there were no streetlights up ahead. A motorcycle came around the curve and headed toward us, but we never heard an engine or saw anything but its white headlight because we were in the middle lane. When it got close to our car, it rose up and went over it. I looked out the back window, but I didn't see anything moving behind us or any light shining on anything. I was very happy. When I was a teenager, the second was over a faraway ridge. On the other side of this ridge is a very large public airport. A huge fan-shaped red-orange light would dim, stop, and dim again in a very mechanical way. This was followed by a strange white strobe, also in the shape of a fan, but it moved at different speeds and in different patterns. They kept doing it over and over, sometimes overlapping. I took my mum with me to see it. I went to the roof to get a better view, but I didn't see anything else. My mum said that after I went around the house, an orange bar that was glowing showed up in the distance. Imagine a sun that is almost setting, but isn't round and is right and stretched out across the horizon. Then he turned left and kept going like a Star Trek ship going into war. I saw the same thing on a video from Florida, but my mum's death wasn't in it. I've seen several satellites do things that satellites can't do, like turn at a right angle or go in the opposite direction when I look back. I've also thought I'd seen a star. Just stop thinking. I was outside drawing in the evening. I draw the stars on paper, and when I looked up, one was missing from the sky. Then there was one in Arizona, which was in the middle of nowhere. About 5 or 6 years ago, my parents and I were driving when we saw a row of lights that looked like the moon blinking from left to right, stopping, and then blinking off in the same order. The way they were set up looked like a tilted sphere or disk. This happened a long time after the Phoenix lights and didn't look anything like them. What we saw was round, orange, white, and hazy around the edges. It didn't move at all. So, here's my story. When I was 8 to 11 years old, between 1971 and 1974, I often dreamed about an alien woman. The details of these dreams were clear and to the point. The last time I dreamed of being with her, I felt very close to her. We were on a ship, but all I can remember is looking out a round window at the Earth as we flew toward it. In the last talk, no words were said. It felt more like telepathy had it gone this way. You are now going back. I won't be coming back to see you, but I'll always be here. I don't know why, but the next thing I remember, I was on a train. Then I came to. Since then, I haven't dreamed of her since I moved into a new shared house when I was about 24. I was sleeping in the middle of the day on a fold-out bed. Then I thought, they're coming next. I think it was annoyingly poking me in the sides. Your uncle might have done it, but it was weird. I could only move my eyes, and I felt like I was being pushed into the bed. I could feel the presence of about 4 beings, all of whom were different in size and rank. I think one of them was kind and keeping the others in line. I wasn't afraid, but I was angry. Then there was no light. 6 hours later, when people came in and closed the door, I woke up. I acted like nothing was wrong. Never said a word. I was driving in Sydney a few years later when I saw a poster for a new book. This book was Communion by Whitley Strieber. First time ever. I dreamed that I knew the face. It was the person on the front. I was very surprised. It seemed to make real a group of dreams I had written off as silly. When I pulled over to get alcohol, I had one more episode. My friend got out of the car. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw something. My friend came back. I asked him how long he'd been gone, and he said about 20 minutes, but it felt like a lot longer than that. I didn't say anything, but I was a jerk that night at the pub. I've always seen a lot of lights in the sky, especially when I was younger. It was always fun to see if I could call them or even amaze my friends. They've been gone for a while, and I feel like I'm all alone. So it was around 2004, and I was about 19 years old at the time. I was at a friend's apartment, where 5 or 6 of us were hanging out in her living room. She lived on the 2nd floor of a building near Buffalo, New York, that had shops and a suburb. We hung out there a lot, and nothing strange ever happened. So one day, around 6 p.m., we go there. During the summer. So it was still daytime when all of a sudden, a blindingly bright light filled the room and stopped all of us in our tracks. When I say bright, I mean that it was like a car's headlights were shining right in our eyes, except that this bright light made us unable to move or speak. We were just there, and the light was so bright that it seemed to light up the whole apartment and the outside as well. We think it lasted about 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Once it was over, we were freaking out. We thought something would be on the news, or people would be asking the same question online, but nothing has happened to this day. We all remember this event, but we don't know what it was. But as time goes on, I'm more and more sure that it was an alien because I can't think of anything else that could have been going on. I've looked everywhere, Google, YouTube, etc. But for someone with a similar story or a possible explanation. But I haven't found anything or anyone who can relate. I was 17. I am now 30. I've had a lot of time to think about a certain event, and I'd like to hear what other people think about it. The things that happened that night have never made sense to me. In 2006, I had gone camping at a campground near Peterborough, Ontario. All of us made up a group of 64 women and men. In 11th and 12th grade, I didn't drink as much on the second night as I did on the first, so I remember this evening. Compared to the first, I remember this one very well, from what I can tell. The second night, the rest is blank. My stomach was still getting back to normal after the first night. That's why I only had one drink that night. We had a great time just hanging out around the campfire and doing things that teenagers do. We ate marshmallows, hot dogs, burgers, and a lot of other things. We all decided to go on a group walk later in the evening, as some of us were very drunk and others were not. We were bored and wanted to see if there were any young campers our age with whom we could hang out. I was taken away from the group at some point. I went into the bushes to go to the bathroom because the bathrooms at the campground were still a long way away. My friends either didn't wait for me or didn't hear me say I needed to be alone for a minute. I can only remember squatting to go to the bathroom. I remember my pants were around my ankles, and then there was nothing. It was just after 2 a.m. At this point, I said I had only had one drink of alcohol that night and wasn't drunk. The next thing I remember, I was walking through the woods and falling down a lot. I felt very lost, dizzy, and off balance. I tripped over something and fell to the ground, hitting my head on a small rock. I turned over onto my back and looked up. I could tell that the sky was getting brighter. When I left the group, it was completely dark. I rubbed my eyes and forehead to make sure that the sky really was getting brighter. I got up and took a look around me. I was confused because I could hear my friends talking. I must have been lost for hours if the sky was bright. I walked out of the woods at least 2 or 3 times. When I came out of my tent mates saw me and asked, "Where have you been? We tried to find you for about 2 hours. Just about 30 minutes ago, we got back to the campsite." This confused me because I'd come out on the other side of the road, but right in front of the campsite we had rented. But we weren't in this part of the park when I left the group to look for something. We were on the other side of the campground when I went missing. The other 5 people in the group confirmed this. I didn't know how to explain what happened and what was said. I just left the room for a moment. I told them to wait for me, and when they saw that I was scared, upset, and confused, they gave up. When my tent partner and I went to sleep for the night, he asked me again what had happened, and I said again what I knew for sure. I was peeing pants around my ankles, and then nothing until I fell and hit my head on a rock. At this point, he was sober, but still didn't know what to do. He gave me a hug, and then we fell asleep for about an hour. Sleep didn't come. He seemed really worried because he knew I shouldn't have come out of the forest where I did. If I had been lost for more than 2 hours, I should have found the paved trail that led to the campsites and let cars get there. When I was 17, school stopped being interesting to me. I felt like I kept learning the same thing over and over again. I asked my mum if I could take the GDES. Instead, I asked her if I could go to a different school, but she said no. When my principal told her I should because I didn't have enough credits, I finally got her to agree about a month later. I turned 18 years old. I was still living at home and looking for work, but I couldn't find one. About 3 weeks after I turned 18, I went to bed like any other night, but I remember going to bed earlier than usual. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. I got up and walked to my bathroom. I looked at my phone again when I got back into bed. 305 am I laid back down. Then I remembered that I hadn't plugged in my phone, so I'm going to go back and do that. Then I saw that I couldn't move. I tell my body to move, but it doesn't, so I start to feel scared. I try to make all kinds of sounds with my mouth. Nothing. I realize I can still move my eyes, so I look around my room and shoot in every direction. The light from my doorway then showed me a shape. I was glad to think it was my mother because I knew she would save me. Then I realized that the shape wasn't of my mother because the head was too big and the body was too thin. Then I remember that I was surrounded by a very bright light. The next thing I know, I'm screaming and yelling and I'm on my bed. My parents ran into my room and I told them what happened while I was shaking like a leaf. Mum says it's a dream and I shouldn't worry. Then I went to bed and checked my phone. 5:15? What the hell did I do? Then I realized that my ears feel like I went to a concert without earplugs for 2 hours. I also worried a lot that it would happen again. After the first abduction, I was so tired that I passed out. That's when things started to get really bad. I think I started having dreams about being paralyzed and remembering what it was like when it happened. I remember when I woke up in the morning, I couldn't move in my bed. So I was sure I wasn't being taken away. I felt pain in my genitalia, like someone was getting in there without any lubricant. Also, at the time, I was a virgin and had never been penetrated before. I don't believe in anything, but my brain kept telling me to call God or someone else. I felt so helpless and scared that I just wanted it to be over. I could finally get up and go, so I sat there on my bed and cried. I felt so hopeless. I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to be thought of as crazy. I went to the bathroom a few days later and got up from the toilet. My back usually gives out and I can't get up. Help me out by calling for someone. My mum comes over and asks, "Do you need toilet paper?" And when I tell her I can't get up, she helps me, but my back is still twisted. It hurts too much. She wanted to know what was wrong. I tell her that I think my back just gave out. "You're 18? You're back. You can't give up. You're trying to get back on track, but I can't help you. It hurts too much." My mum calls a family friend who is a chiropractor. When I ask her about it, she tells me that my mum has also gotten emergency adjustments at her office. My mum makes me walk slowly to the car. It was so hard to sit down. Every bump in the road hurt a lot. We finally get to her practice, and when she checks my back, T3 and T4 are way out of whack. She moved my back and gave me a TENS unit, which stimulates nerves with electricity. We are driving home while the TENS unit works its magic on my back muscles, which are tightening up. I feel like I'm being watched all of a sudden. I look up and see 3 triangle-shaped balls of light. I asked my mum what they are. What did she ask? Then I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, we were almost home, which shouldn't be possible. I asked my mum if she had seen the lights. Again, she asked, "What lights?" Then I asked how we got home so quickly. She gave a shrug, but she didn't care. She was nearly there. I would have horrible dreams about being on a strange medical table with a big needle going into the base of my skull. It was something that happened again and again. Every once in a while, that would happen. I always thought my neck would hurt when I woke up, but it never did. Well, move along. 30 months. I have a job and a boyfriend. Things are going well, and the crazy talk about aliens taking people away has stopped, but it's always in the back of my mind. The person I'm seeing sleeps with me, so I stopped having strange things happen to me at night. But I'm not sure if they just knock me out better now that there are 2 of them. When I tell my fiancée about the pain I feel every day, she says I should probably see a doctor to find out if I have an autoimmune disease, which is weird but not unheard of. I still forget things, lose track of time, and have other problems. It's hard to keep it together. But talking to a therapist and friends who actually believe me has made me feel less alone and less scared. Even though she doesn't believe in aliens, my partner also thinks I'm telling the truth. She said that what I went through is real, and she thinks that the government abducts people to promote the alien story, which is an interesting way to look at it.